Hello, welcome back to my channel, a place where you can let go of your stress while listening to stories found on the internet, or not. You can call me DW, for those who didn't know. So just grab your favorite drink, sit back, and relax. Well now, let's start by turning down the background music, shall we? This is part 2 of a 7-part story, so it is highly recommended to listen to the first part before starting this current part. I'm going to leave a link in the description for that, so no worries, I got you covered. Well, let's get started, shall we? Part 2. The Rabbit Room. Let's start in a cabinet. A strange place, I know. I had come back inside, still eerily haunted by Rufus, and made my way into the adjoining room to the parlor, the one opposite the dining room. Inside, there wasn't much. A chair in the corner, with a small table to its right, a lamp, and across from this setup was a large cabinet. It was wood with white peeling paint, and at first both the doors appeared to be locked. But when the stickiness of old waxy finish gave way, the doors creaked open. Upon my first glance, the contents were disappointing. Had I expected Frank to keep his secrets in a cabinet in the side room? Like the murder weapon itself would be sitting right there for the taking? Perhaps. But what I actually found was a mostly empty space, with a record and a bit of paper inside. The record was something called Circus Calliope, something that alarmingly to me and others who are uneasy around clowns appeared to just be a disc of circus music. The bit of paper, though, was what caught my eye. It was a small cartoon of a line of houses in simple black and white ink, but it was the building to the far right that caught my eye. In that moment, I was standing right inside of it. It was 21st S Main Street, or else an artiste representation devoid of ivy. That was strange, perhaps, but stranger still was the fact that it was on a street with other houses. As Main Street, you see, is a bit of a joke in Habitsville. Though labeled a main street, it's actually a road that's as far to the edge of town you can go without crossing the border into the next one. The only building out there for miles among the trees and wilderness is the home of Frank McKinley. Why then was it pictured here on an actual main street? And why, of all things, were these what I found alone in a cabinet, in a room that was otherwise mostly empty? I closed the cabinet rather quickly and moved on to the next room. I didn't have much time left. Remember, Frank had given me 20 minutes to look around on my own. I went into the next few rooms after that without much notable discovery. They were cluttered and cramped, but rather than drawing attention to their own bloated contents, but only made me wonder more about the rooms that were kept empty. In many rooms, I found sights like this. The ivy that I had admired earlier from the outside was making its way in through the closed windows, and though the house was old, it surprised me that these spindly tendrils were able to break through glass just to get into the home. At one point, I rounded the corner and had stopped rather quickly Out of nowhere was a staircase, narrow and daunting. It was as though it was an afterthought. The servant stairs, I assumed. Given the age of the house, I snapped a picture of it after going up. I have to admit, the time I spent in the narrow dark space was not pleasant. There weren't as many rooms upstairs as there had been downstairs. Many of them were open, ajar spare bedrooms and what looked like storage areas for more of the clutter that had overtaken many of the other rooms. The one I approached, of course, was the one at the end of the hallway. The one with the door that was only slightly open. Upon closer examination, it was also the only one with a door with broken hinge. What I found inside was strange. I've decided to call it the rabbit room. It wasn't very large, but probably looked even bigger than it was because it was completely empty. Well, almost completely. The lighting was eerie due to the large plastic sheets that hung tethered in front of the two windows on the far side of the room. They glowed, while the rest of the room remained dark. And there, in the middle of the floor, was a small statue of two rabbits. I took a few steps into the room and, cliché as it sounds, I swear, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. It was completely silent. The chatter that had echoed from the dining room downstairs couldn't reach this corner of the house. I was alone, just me, the sound of my own breathing, and the rabbits. "Dinner's ready." My heart gave a violent jump as a growingly familiar voice sounded behind me. I whirled around to see Rufus, looming in the doorway, watching me. Thank you. I'll be right down." He gave no notion of hearing me, only continued to stand and stare. I figured he intended to escort me back to the dining room, and walked back towards the door, giving the rabbits one last look before exiting the room. Rufus let me go in front of him, and as I started to find my way back to the stairs, I heard him close the door to the rabbit room completely behind us. Perhaps that had been something I wasn't supposed to see. I re-entered the dining room to a similar scene as the one I had left 20 minutes beforehand. Dr. Raid and Sasha were both talking animatedly. Dr. Raid was describing the magnitude of the pyramids at Giza, and Sasha was lamenting that he'd never been to visit. And there was Frank, hands lightly clasped, staring straight ahead, staring straight at me. "Welcome back," he said, cutting off Dr. Raid and Sasha's discussion. "Did you find everything you were looking for?" I went back to my seat next to Dr. Raid and sat down. I looked to Frank, who still appeared to be watching me, milky eyes fixed in my direction. If he was at all apprehensive about the experience I had had in his home, his face did little to show it. Yes, thank you. I got a lot of good photos." "Wonderful," Frank said, then turned his head slightly to the right, where Rufus was standing, waiting as usual. "Rufus," he started, "let's begin. The events that followed are difficult to explain. I have to warn you, things aren't going to move quickly from now on. Once the dinner began, things escalated fast. Next time, dinner discussions and, yes, death." Well, what do you think? Is the story good? Let me know in the comment section down below, and please subscribe if you haven't yet. We'll see you again next time. Sweet dreams.